engaging the community since 1970. This is WIS Awareness.
Good morning and thank you for joining us for Awareness. I'm your host, Megan Norman. Incendiary remarks by Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump.
Donald J. Trump is calling for a total and complete shutdown of Muslims entering the United States until our country's representatives can figure out what the hell is going on.
His remarks have sent shock waves through the campaign trail and reverberated around the globe. But Republican presidential frontrunner Donald Trump is not backing down from his call for a ban on all Muslims entering the United States. Karen Kaifa has the latest reaction from Washington, including what leaders of his party have to say.
Criticism and outrage from Republican leaders.
What was proposed yesterday is not what this party stands for.
From the White House.
What Donald Trump said yesterday disqualifies him from serving as president.
And from around the world.
This statement clearly shows that he's not eligible for leadership of a superpower nation.
The day after Donald Trump proposed a ban on Muslims entering the United States, the Republican presidential frontrunner refused to waver.
They want our buildings to come down. They want our cities to be crushed. I am saying that until we figure this out, we should have a ban.
Many GOP rivals have reacted forcefully, like Senator Lindsey Graham of South Carolina.
And you know how you make America great again? Tell Donald Trump to go to hell.
Senator Ted Cruz of Texas, in second place behind Trump in many polls, had a more measured response.
I disagree with that proposal. I like Donald Trump. A lot of our friends here have encouraged me to criticize and attack Donald Trump. I'm not interested in doing so.
Many of Trump's supporters said they support the proposal.
I don't want him here.
That's a very prudent idea, and I think that he's done due diligence.
And so the Republican Party faces a dilemma once more.
The past few months with Donald Trump have been an outrage du jour, and Republicans have spent a lot of time condemning him.
The most recent CNN ORC poll of Republican voters nationwide found Trump with a 20-point lead over his closest competitor, with less than 2 months to go before the first 2016 contest in Iowa. In Washington, I'm Karen Kaifa.
President Barack Obama had this to say about terrorism one day before Donald Trump's comments.
ISIL does not speak for Islam. They are thugs and killers, part of a cult of death. And they account for a tiny fraction of more than 1 billion Muslims around the world, including millions of patriotic Muslim Americans who reject their hateful ideology.
Joining me now is Hamid Khan, the Deputy Director for the Rule of Law Collaborative at USC. Hamid used to serve as Senior Rule of Law Program Officer at the United States Institute of Peace, where he worked on rule of law issues throughout the Islamic world. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
And helping to provide some more insight on everything that's been going on lately in the news. First, I want to start with what exactly is Islam? What are the foundations of Islam?
Well, Islam is, as mentioned in before, the religion of over 1.5 billion people around the world. Its primary focus is on monotheism, and much like other major religions, is predicated on social justice, on a focus on prayer, giving of alms. The basic message that, according to Muslim belief, has continued over time and been delivered by messengers over time. Today we find Muslims in every part of the world, whether it's in the areas of Asia, in Africa, or here at home in the United States.
And are there some similarities to Christianity?
Well, like Christianity, Islam is a monotheistic religion. It's predicated on love. It's predicated also on the belief of social justice. And Islam specifically mandates that Christians and Jews, people are believers in one God, are considered people of the book. And unlike other major religions, codifies tolerance. So in that regard, Islam believes in social justice. It believes in the overarching belief in one God and in a society, in a just society.
So if those are the beliefs with love and respect and social justice, how do extremists abuse Islam? How does it become radical Islam?
Well, in many ways, it's a departure from the main and fundamental beliefs of Islam. Islam believes in the Ten Commandments. It believes and forbids the killing of innocent individuals. It forbids committing anything of any sort of terror or activities against people. And this departure by radical Muslims has been one in which they have used the religion to legitimize and justify their heinous activities by parsing out certain bits of the text, the sacred text of the Quran, and then using it to say that violence is okay, violence is justified.
Right, and we've seen that abuse of religion in a bunch of different groups. I mean, we've seen it used to validate slavery, for example.
Right. Slaves in this country were basically subjugated because they said that verses of the Bible allowed it. And yet we find that other religious justifications were used, for example, for the pursuit of the Crusades, the Inquisition. We have to remember that religious contexts and religion itself has been used for violence in a variety of different times and in a variety of different religions around the world.
What is the draw for those who choose to become a part of this radical Islam, who choose to become terrorists?
Well, we have to remember that when someone becomes radicalized, in most situations, there are what we call pull and push factors. And in many instances, many of these individuals are aggrieved by whatever grievances affect them. If we look at extremist groups in the Muslim world, we'll note that they exist and predominate and in fact flourish in places where violence is prevalent, where war is prevalent. Take, for example, Syria or Somalia or the Taliban in Afghanistan. In each of those situations, they not only have been the subject of violence within the wars that they have faced, they also seek to justify revenge and to justify their own personal grievances.
Right. And it seems to fill a void of sorts for these people because in my mind, I liken it to gangs where someone feels like they're missing something, they're missing a family, they're missing love or respect or something that they feel like they can find within this gang. So it seems like it's a very similar analogy.
And importantly, we can't underestimate the potency of religion, a sense of belonging, a sense of justification. And if we can interlace that justification with a moral message of a religion and a religion that is spread around the world, it becomes that much more potent. This is precisely why Islam becomes the ideology or the vestibule for many of these violent movements, because rather than look to their nation, rather than look to their community, they look to a broader worldwide religion and then basically try to fester and justify their activities by approaching religion and saying it's okay.
And do you think a majority of people, maybe not a majority, but some people see these terrorist attacks and they just want to lump all Muslims together, saying this is what they all believe?
Clearly. Whether or not we're here in the United States or in other parts of the world, whether we've seen the attacks in Paris or in Cairo, the reality remains, however, that because it is a religion and because it is based upon sacred texts, and because those texts are widely available, unlike a time in the past, they can go ahead, take for what it's worth, read matters out of context, out of their historical perspective, and then say, aha, I found the verse. I found something that says this is okay.
Right, that validates what we're doing.
Exactly. And in many ways, it's just... These comments represent, in my opinion, not only an aberration of what it means to justify oneself for the presidency of the United States and as an American, but it represents a long continuum of bigotry, misogyny, and xenophobia by Donald Trump. And it doesn't even have to go much farther than calling John McCain, a decorated war hero, a loser. Whether the attacks are against women, whether they're calling Mexicans rapists, whether it's justifying violence against African Americans who dutifully protest the type of isolationist and xenophobic activities. And now we've had Muslims. And frankly, Muslims have become a bit of a scapegoat, and not much different than what we've seen in other countries and in other contexts.
Do you think his comments will fuel ISIS and fuel other terrorist groups?
ISIS is predicated on the idea that the West, and particularly the United States, is at odds with Islam. And yet, ironically, rather than take the cue from President George Bush, who after 9/11, after one of the most horrific days in our history, took arms against the notion that this is not Islam, but rather to segregate and to separate those individuals, Donald Trump has played right into the hands of the terrorists by turning a well-founded fear and concern among Americans into a broad brush that isolates an entire religion and an entire group of people.
Do you think there's a way we can turn this around? We can use his message and use it for good, so to speak, and sort of, not validate what he said, but figure out a way to work with the Muslim community in a more positive way?
I think it's already happening, frankly. What's not being reported is that, for example, Muslim Americans have joined together and last year collected $45,000 to rebuild black churches. This year, over $100,000 have been raised in a Launch Good campaign for the victims and their families in San Bernardino. The activities of the Departments of Homeland Security, the FBI, and the NYPD, and their outreach to Muslim communities takes place on a daily basis. Those realities are real, and yet they're being ignored. The reality is there are Americans to this day who serve in uniform, who serve and defend their country and die for their country. So the reality is most Muslims and most Americans, I believe, as witnessed by the condemnations of Americans of every political stripe, either know Muslims and know that they are their friends, their allies, their neighbors. They're all around. So I think now is the time to actually increase our awareness of both Islam and our reach out of Muslims.
As opposed to fueling the ignorance that is still very much out there.
Obviously there is ignorance, and people like myself and other Muslims have to step forward and make sure that Americans know that we are one of them. At the same time, we have to be careful that we don't endanger America and we don't justify violence against Americans, both those serving in uniform, the civilians serving abroad, and any reason for others to justify attacks against Americans. This isn't just about not only being un-American, it puts our national security at risk.
Right. And then one other thing I wanted to talk to you about, a lot of times people say if you see something, say something. But when a teacher said something about her student in Texas, he made a clock and more or less labeled him as a terrorist. But then people look at the San Bernardino shooting and say, well, people should have seen that he was withdrawn. Maybe his mother should have seen something and should have said something to possibly have prevented this attack. So you've got two extremes there. How do you draw the line? When do you say something? Is there a right way to know that? There
are right ways of knowing that. First and foremost, we have to be sure that we understand the difference between a predisposition to crime on the observer's part, but we also have to understand the police's reaction. In the case of the clock, we had a misapprehension by both school administrators, but also what arguably could be an overreaction by law enforcement. So this two-pronged approach focuses on the community at large to be aware, to know that there are activities that might be out of place, but also importantly for police to be diligent, to understand the context and cultural norms, and to understand the difference between what might look like a misperception or what might actually be a criminal act.
I know the police's action was kind of overboard.
Still to come on awareness.
Comments like this would absolutely make us feel alienated, because we feel like we are part of the society. We work hard. We try to contribute to the society. We enjoy it. We want to raise our kids here, and we don't want to feel alienated.
More from the Muslim community in the Midlands about the recent nationwide backlash against their faith and how we can all move forward. Welcome back to Awareness. Since Donald Trump's comments on the campaign trail, there have been cases across the country where Muslims have been attacked, mosques vandalized, and hate speech spewed. Many are now speaking out against that hate. Joining me now is Mutahir Sabri, who is on the Board of Trustees for the Islamic Center of Columbia, also Habib Adli, Ariel Bledsoe, and Lukman Lawal, also members of the Islamic Center of Columbia. Now, thank you all very much for being with me this morning.
Thank you for having us.
I want to start with your initial reaction to Donald Trump's comments. I'm going to start with you, Habib.
My initial thought was, it's danger. It's dangerous. It's going to make people who already feel the same way that he does, but keep it hidden inside, it's going to give them an extra motivation to come out and start saying and doing things that they may have hidden before, and it's going to cause hurt, emotionally and physically to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm. And then when you heard his comments, did you automatically think, okay, this is going to be terrible for the Muslim community? Did you already anticipate a backlash?
Yes, I did anticipate a backlash, but I also have a greater faith in the common sense and intelligence of the American people, that they would not give in to the pandering of fear and ignorance that was displayed by Mr. Trump.
Mm-hmm. And Ariel, what was your reaction?
How un-American it was, honestly. Especially if you go back in history and look at what the Founding Fathers believed in, how this country was founded, what the ideas for religious freedom. Many of our ancestors were fleeing persecution, and that's what this country was supposed to be, a land of opportunity, a land of freedom. Mm-hmm. And yet he's saying he's representative of the majority of the people, that he's protecting American interests. So, I was concerned, again, with the reaction, what it would be, and I also had hope that there would be more common sense.
Mm-hmm. And Lukman.
Yeah, what I think is, the first time he said that, I was like, this is against what America stands for. Because you are trying to lead America, and you're going to say something that is un-America in public, mm-hmm. like that. Mm-hmm. So I think that's just wrong.
Right, and he said that, and as un-American as you say it may be, there were a lot of Americans who applauded him and a lot of Americans who agreed with his comments. Now, have you heard or seen any backlash here in Colombia?
Well, I personally have experienced it within my family, at my daughter's school, where, the children or some of the school students there feed into this, mm-hmm. this Islamophobia and make comments when they see Muslims in the halls or in their classes. The ladies may be wearing their hijab or khimar, the head covering and the clothing, mm-hmm. and so they make little off the cuff remarks right. to shame Islam or to just make jokes and to make people feel uncomfortable. And it happened to my daughter just recently, and of course it's very disturbing and very mm-hmm. upsetting. Even though we know that it's out of ignorance, this is something that the schools are working right. very hard to combat. And
it's certainly still hurtful. What do you tell your daughter?
Well, I tell her to be patient and to not take it personal, and also to report it to the appropriate authorities, mm-hmm. and not take it on her own accord or in her own hands to react to it, because it could lead to something much worse.
Now, what is the Islamic Center doing to try to combat some of these negative stereotypes?
Programs like this to get it out in the public, let people know how we feel, what Islam is about. And we invite people. We have Share Islam Day, where we actually invite the public to come to the mosque, go inside, see what's going on. Our doors are always open. Mm-hmm. I mean, there's no secrets there. There's no closed door meetings or whatever. I mean, it's open. Anybody can come at any time. Right. We have services on Friday. Everybody's welcome to come and partake, and see what's going on.
Right. What do you want viewers out there to know about your faith, those who may be ignorant of your faith of Islam?
Just like Abib said about the Share Islam, actually the Share Islam is an event that's been going on for like the last 5 years. It's an annual event, and we educate the public on Islam, what we believe in and what Islam is about, and we educate the public on what we agree and what we don't agree.
Right. Well, we're just getting started here. We're going to take a quick break and come right back with our panel. Please stay with us. Welcome back. I want to leave our viewers with something maybe unique about your faith that they don't know about. How, Habib, would you say we continue to fight the hate?
The most important thing is just to be educated. Educate yourself on what Islam is about. Come and visit us. Read up on it. You got to be careful what you read, but if you're really interested, come down to the Islamic Center. It's on Gervais Street. We'd be happy to have anybody come down, any questions. The most important thing is education. Just educate yourself on Islam and what Islam really teaches and does not teach. Mm-hmm.
Yes, we would like to encourage that the broader community get to know more about Islam, and to know that Islam forbids anyone to be forced to accept Islam. In the Quran, the specific text states, let there be no compulsion in religion. You can't force a person to believe because it would not be sincere, and sincerity is a part of one's faith. So we invite, as Habib said, the non-Muslim community to get to know about Islam and Muslims. We are your neighbors. Some of are your doctors, some of you are professors, and we're going to be here. Some of us have heard the statement, you should go back where you came from.
Right.
Many of us were born right here, so where we're going to go. Exactly.
Right.
So
right.
We want to allay the fears in the community to encourage them to, as Malcolm X, Haj Malik Sabra stated before he passed, to think for yourself. Don't let others think for you. Don't let others form your own opinions. Do the research and find out so that you can make an informed decision, an informed judgment.
Right. And Ariel, your final comments?
As a convert, I get people telling me all the time that I've betrayed my country, but what they don't understand is Islam is one of the 3 Abrahamic faiths. More than 2 billion people in the world practice it. So for people not to know anything about it isn't even acceptable, really. And we are approachable. I don't mind anybody asking questions, the most off-the-top wall questions that you have. Ask. I'm not afraid to answer them, and I'm not afraid to be approached.
Right.
Get to know us, ask us questions, whatever you want to know, we're here.
Right. It's all about awareness and being educated. Thank you. And Lukman?
Yeah, I'll say the same thing. It's all about education, because if you just take the time and study the Quran and study the Hadith, and which is the saying of the Prophet, a lot of people will be surprised what they say. It's the complete opposite of what's in the media. The terrorists don't represent us. ISIS, Al-Qaeda, Boko Haram, they don't represent Islam. Most of these guys are politically motivated. It's not for Islam. It's something driving these people. It's not religion.
It's not what you stand for.
Yes, we don't stand for that. Well, so my conclusion is just get educated, get the Islamic knowledge, pick up the Quran, read it, and you'll be surprised what you find in there.
Well, I want to thank you all very much for being here and getting this conversation started.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with the final thought. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." We would like to hear from you. Let us know how you feel about this topic by visiting our Awareness Facebook page. I'd like to thank all of our guests this morning. Until next time, I'm Megan Norman. This is Awareness.